You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I could not be more pleased to have Ruby Roth here on the show. And before, I always start talking at the beginning of the show, Ruby, because I get so excited, but I'm just going to let you say hi to everybody.
Hi everybody, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to reach you. I'm out on the coast where I record sometime and reaching you down from Southern California. And I got to tell you, like, Ruby, like, I got so fascinated by, when you're looking like on Instagram stuff and you see like different components and like how it appeals to you and you get kind of excited. I was like, so the exhibit you have, La Luz de Jesus museum, I just adore, and the show has had some guests from that gallery. You have an iteration of yourself, an identity, strong vegan children's author. I've been vegan since 95.
How funny.
I adore your art. The Cowgirls exhibit at La Luz is just so thrilling to see the images. And hearing a bit about
it's a gallery I've wanted to be in for 20 plus years. So
hell yeah,
this was an exciting one for me.
Hell yeah! So we both, yes, La Luz. So excited to see that for you, but so there's these things that draw me to you in your story, and as a philosophy show and talking about identity and why we're doing things. I just felt like we were kind of like thinking the same space, but
absolutely.
I wanted to ask you first off to give a little bit of a backdrop. When did you see yourself as an artist? Is a process, or you like I made it here, or what?
I think it was always kind of accepted in my family that I was the artistic type. I was drawing since I was a little girl, as soon as I got my hands on pencils and crayons. So it was clear from early age that I was going to be in the artistic creative field. Professionally, there's I think crossroads that you reach where you start to feel like you can kind of own that name and own the profession. When I held my first children's book in my hand, the first copy, that was like a feeling of elation and some kind of arrival, that this is official now. This begins an official career.
Yeah. What about what about reinvention? What about was it
been major? That's been major for me in the last handful of years. Basically since 2016, I left a 14-year identity-defining relationship with a man who was my art mentor and whose studio I worked for and whose daughter I helped raise. And I was doing my children's books all through that time, kind of on the side. And those were the vegan children's books. They were the first of their kind in children's literature.
Thank you for those, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, they became like, I didn't set out to be a children's book author, but they became kind of the go-to books in this burgeoning community around the world. And so I kept going, and there's 5 books now. One is a little bit more about emotional intelligence and managing our inner life. But when I left that relationship in 2016, I wasn't a mom anymore suddenly, and I wasn't packing lunches, and I wasn't doing kid stuff. And I had to figure out how I was going to make it on my own. And I started to bring my personal art to the forefront at that point, which was what it had always been since I was a child, just feminine, figurative work centered around the body. And being in the digital age, I confronted problems algorithms and audience and the way people want you to be distinct in one area, and God forbid you change. It's like starting from scratch. So evolution and reinvention has been a big theme for me in the last handful of years, and having to be okay with wrapping up an old project, which was a series of 5 books that got acclaim. I was reaching 250,000 people a week in my social media. The books were translated into multiple languages around the world. I was traveling the nation, being a speaker and doing media spots on TV. The reinvention part was so personal because I had to kind of wrap that project in a bow and leave it behind, and come to the conclusion that all the acclaim, the numbers, the project, all belongs to those books and the past. And I got myself to a place where I was like, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. I don't even need that audience to follow me. I was trying to kind of like pull some of my old audience along and see if they would come. But nude figurative art and children's books are the opposite ends of spectrums for many people. It's all, the same to me. It's all lines on paper to me, and it comes from me and one person. So I never wanted to do it under different pen names because I just felt like that was disingenuous. But yeah, the reinvention is still unfolding, and as I find a new audience and find new goals and areas to take this art.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, we'll talk a bit more about it, but I mean just I can feel like within that too, just like trying to figure out what the audience seems like almost an entity for you. You'll be like, trying to figure out probably to a certain point of like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I'm the artist, I'm
I think
doing
some
things.
people were offended even, they started seeing nude art and probably started flagging my posts too, which became a problem.
Yeah.
Now I have 5 or 6 posts always that are like violating community guidelines just because they're figurative artworks. So
Yeah.
it's a funny thing, and it's a problem specifically of our digital age. Shel Silverstein, one of everybody's favorite children's books authors, the, the the Giving Tree and Where the Sidewalk Ends. He also illustrated for Playboy and was a playwright and wrote songs that were on, top pop 50 charts. So, but he didn't have to have a website. He didn't have to
Yeah.
make everything cohesive under one brand. So it's definitely, uh, these are new problems of the digital
Do
age.
you think even within that context, as a hypothetical shell as a man would have been able to get away with it, or you think it was just kind of that visibility bit being able to hide away?
I don't know.
Yeah.
A similar thing happened to Tommy Ungerer, the famous children's book author who's award winning. And when he started doing anti-war posters that were pretty graphic and got into erotica, it took a while for the media to pick up on it. This was also pre-internet. But once they did, they blacklisted him, and his books were burned, his books were removed from libraries, and he was so distraught he left the country.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's happened before, where people just are not accepting of the artist as a 360 entity.
I'm trying to remember now. I'm a big comic book fan. Superman, one of the Superman artists, uh, did it was kind of like S&M underground like illustrations, and you look a little bit like, is that Lois Lane? It's like, no, it kind of looks like Lois Lane's sister, like and
Daddy
I think
sister.
like the artist's mind is like I'm so invested like in my head in the artist with like the artist's humanity trying to do what they want to do. It's something you were saying there. It seemed to be like, let her be human. Like there was just like peace and ringing in my head of being like, what the hell? And the
I
dynamics
mean,
is
it's wild. The audience, the algorithm, they want you to stay distinct. They want you to basically do the same thing over and over, down to the color palette. In the beginning of Instagram, for a long time, all the marketing where people were suggesting, create your grid with a cohesive palette. I was like, what? The artist is
I
supposed to
hear you.
narrow down the palette. It's a bizarre it's a bizarre position to be in.
Yeah. And uh, in reading about some of your work in advocacy on veganism, I was reminded of a book I had read a bit ago, which really just like I was trying to like quickly kind of interpret some of the things I was seeing through it as far as basically sexual politics of what's going on. The book, The Sexual Politics of Meat by
Yeah,
Carol J. Adams. And
yeah,
yeah, for me, without getting too far into it, it was this distillation of the feminine in a capitalist society. And a famous image for listeners who won't be able to see it, but there's the cover of the book had a "What's Your Cut?" and it was the female body cut up into pieces, like you go into the
hmm
the meat department, right? And so those elements of bodily autonomy, like
yeah, and gender.
the connection of the feminine, the relationship of meat with men. I deal with that. Like born in 72, became vegan in 95, been vegan more than half my life as a male.
Yeah,
As people don't even bug me, but like when I was younger and stuff, like there was
of
definitely like a
course.
male type of, effete type
Right.
of, oh, no meat for you.
Yeah.
That,
Well, I've identified that in myself when I first turned vegan. I realized that I was proud to kind of be a tomboy and eat meat with the boys, and had to really examine why that was, and um, the politics behind it for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and the whole industry is based, on female cow bodies, or or female chicks. The males are really not usable. So, I mean, there's all kinds of uh, gendered behavior that we all participate in,
yeah,
down to the foods that we eat.
yeah. Um, all right. I want to know, because I want to like remember and hit a couple of the conceptual questions, just like the what is what. I think the question "what is art" is fascinating, particularly like with what you're doing, like, grappling with that question, even with the reinvention. But this is really important to you. You've done it a long time. You got a exhibit in La Luz. Congratulations again. But what is art? Like, what is this whole thing you're trying to do?
It's so different for every person, but for me, I always wanted to create something with purpose beyond just self-expression. For a long time, I didn't really identify with wanting to be a gallery artist. I was more interested in illustration and illustrating uh, artwork that went along with concepts. My senior show in college was way more illustrative than any of the other students in the class. Like they were almost like what you would see going along with an illustration you'd see going on with a political article. Um, and that's what led me into the children's books first, because I was teaching art in an after school program, and kids noticed that I wasn't eating what they were eating. And um, I found that there wasn't a book that I could bring in that I wanted to read them. And so I made it myself. And that was the merging of the political and the art, which was meaningful to me. There was depth beyond just, creating art because I need to get it out of me. But art is also that for me. It's this expression. It's maybe even more than expression. It's processing. I'm processing my inner world and my experience in the outer world through the art that I create.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Well, what's the role of it? What's the role of art? I mean, you mentioned that there's some imbued meaning in obviously what you've done. Like, it carries some weight, So it's like, what do you think the role is of art is? And 2024. I don't know. I've looked outside. Shit seems like haywire, and
Yeah,
all this
I
stuff
know.
going on, and climate change, and like like everything. Has the role of art right now changed?
Um, I think it's always changing. It changes for the artist and it changes for the viewer. For me, in the last handful of years, I've thought of art as a way to remind ourselves of who we are. And it is that for me on my end, as I make real something that I feel, something that I think, that I articulate into physical form. And then I hope that anybody who connects with it or buys the piece is bringing it into their home to trigger a feeling in themselves. And I think that art is so powerful. What you hang around your house helps you live. It's not, for me, it's not just what goes with the couch. It never has been. The art I have a woman on a ship. I have a map of the stars. I have a map of the body. And I realized later that the art I hung was not just, it had a way deeper meaning. When I realized, like, the first piece of expensive art I bought myself was this goddess woman on a ship. And I bought it while I was in that long-term relationship. When I got out of that relationship, what I had on my walls were these maps. And there was like a map of the body and all the nadis and the chi energy lines. And
Yeah.
there was an 11th century depiction of the Milky Way. And I realized one day, I didn't even know I was buying maps, but it looked like to me philosophically, while I was in that relationship, I was navigating. I was
Oh
driving a
shit.
ship
Yeah.
and navigating. And in this new phase, I was mapping. I was no longer navigating. Had arrived somewhere where I could map out my life. And that was completely subconscious. Something I realized coming home from the framer one day and looking around. So, having those visual reminders helps bolster. To me, it's like having an altar in your home. What your
Yeah.
art is, an altar, helps you remember who you are, where you came from, and in weak moments, the art around you can help you make decisions about your life. They're like reflections of your core values and a reminder.
Yeah. What you said had had like a lot of meaning to me as far as like going to art and those type of objects, because I think when I was younger, it's like I had these like strong energies throughout my life, but it was like fuck everything that came before, like it's very healthy and good and most of the time for a certain amount.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like really starting to understand how things could impact me, smells could impact me, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
a visual, like if you're sensitive to painting, you look at a painting and it completely like, I don't know, sometimes
Yeah,
restructures like your DNA and you feel somewhat different and you're like,
absolutely.
I want to be around that thing or not
Right.
if it
Or
does a
you
different
well up with
effect.
tears, or absolutely. The first time I walked into Nikolai the Fetchin House in New Mexico,
Uh-huh.
um, he's one of my most favorite artists. And he was Russian, ended up in Taos, and fell in love with the Native American culture. And now his house there is a museum. And I walked in and I welled up and like tears
Yeah.
started rolling. And uh, and I think the articulation of being around human greatness and potential. And some people come here and reach their potential, and we're so grateful for them because they make an impact on millions of people for years and years to come. So it's very powerful. That was the first time I understood, with the footage you see of people crying at concerts.
Yeah.
Um, and that really hit me. So yeah, we're energetic beings. We make vitamins in our skin from sunlight. Exposure to sunlight. We can pick up somebody's energy walking across the street from them. So yeah, what we surround ourselves with, down to smell, even, like, is important. I think looking at a world that's haywire, it's extra important to help our nervous systems and our senses find refuge.
Yeah, what you said. Yeah, like I don't know. It's good. It's good to point out like where the kind of wellspring is and where like there's some good. I had the interesting motive experience just recently. It was with the pain because I was actually out. I do labor work. I'm a union guy for the last quarter century, and I was at a work conference out in New York City, and I ended up at the Museum of Modern Art, which I actually hadn't been in New York City, and I didn't know that they had Andrew Wyeth's Christina's World uh, painting. I'd never seen it in person. I've looked at it a billion times and fascinated by it. Of course, thinking about the body, right, and disability with the main character there. And it's just, I can feel it in my body every once in a while. It's like, okay, I happened upon something that I always wanted to do. I didn't check the manuals, but here I am right now. And then with some of those paintings, it's like, and I'm not like with this with everything. Just when I'm so moved by a painting, it's like looking at the grass and seeing which of the grasses were like scratches and which were like painting going out this way, and just looking into that world specifically. And I'm like, I was there for like 10 minutes, and it's that feeling where you're looking around and like, does everybody know like what this thing is
Yeah,
right
yeah,
here?
yeah,
Like,
the
and the
level.
person who walks by haphazardly, don't you know what's here? And
Yeah,
that's the experience for everybody, right? Not for everybody, but that experience in a museum where you're like, I want to bite this painting, which is my biggest problem.
no,
It's like,
absolutely. And I think not everybody gets it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I think I'm a little bit of a snob, I think, when it comes to art, and um, the people I look up to in art history are so skilled. And because I know how hard it is, how hard painting is,
Mm,
and where the human potential can get to in the skill, there's a lot of like more folk art, abstract art. Like I just, it doesn't ever hit me like it does when I see someone who can render a beautiful hand in a few strokes.
a
And
hand.
people don't,
Yeah.
yeah, a hand or a foot, like JC
Yep.
Leyendecker. Like I call him like 6-stroke Leyendecker. Like you can't, if you look close, his paintings are like a number of strokes on a simple shape, and you have to understand light and value and shape and color and composition, and form to make something look so real, in just a few strokes, versus like, a rendered photo that looks quote unquote just like a photograph is actually not as hard,
Mm,
to get to. And I think a lot of people who don't really know about the skills behind what it takes to paint at a certain level think that that's really impressive, when something that's, to me, a few strokes is way more impressive, and has a read from 6 feet back, and you look up close to it and it's completely abstract up close. You can't even
yeah.
tell. It's just like a few dabs and a slight variation on the value that gives it form and gives it an edge or a highlight or something. Is wild.
Yeah. Explain the magic. You can get at it.
Yeah,
That's yeah. All right. So let's pretend the listeners are around the neighborhood where La Luz de is the gallery, and your exhibit there, which you're very excited about. I'm excited for you. Great gallery. Great to see your work there. Haven't seen it physically. Visualize. Tell us what people are gonna see. It's got to be
it's a
sunny.
small.
It's got to be sunny
Yeah,
outside first, right?
yeah. This is LA. La Luz de Jesus is one. I feel like one of the older galleries in LA. Mr. Shire started it in the 80s on Melrose, and now it's in Los Feliz in Hollywood. And it's a gallery inside this amazing gift shop and bookstore, and just has just the oddest ends in it. It's really fun store. Um, and you walk through the store and all these oddities, and you get to the white walls of the gallery. The show I'm in right now is called Bodywork, and it's me and 3 other artists. And my collection on the 2 walls there are 9 sad cowgirls. And they're all solo women in kind of vast landscapes alone. And they came from a love of cowboy culture for me that reaches back to Kauai in the 1970s, where my parents were both living when they met. My dad was in a honky-tonk band and was a country musician. And cowboy culture in Kauai actually stretches back to the 1800s and 1900s, when cattle were first brought over. And then Mexican vaqueros from California were brought over to teach the Hawaiians how to deal with the cattle. So there's a word, paniolo in Hawaiian is cowboy. And so there's, it's not that old of a history, it's only a couple centuries old, but there's cowboy culture wrapped up in Hawaiian culture. And so I've always kind of been obsessed with the cowboy, the cowgirl, the outlaw. And these particular images came after the end of another relationship. When I got out of that 14-year relationship, I wanted something completely different. And this is in my book, Boss Inside, which is a collection of journal entries during that time when I left that relationship and got my life back on track. But I said, I want a cowboy from Texas, and that's who showed up. And as I processed the end of that relationship, I started painting these women in vast landscapes who were content in their solitude and lived by their own rules. And they're nude. Most of them are nude or wearing, light clothing, but these cowgirl boots. And so I feel like they're in environments that are like the temperature supports them, the earth supports them, and they are creating solid ground inside of themselves.
Dang. Thanks for the background on the vaqueros up there.
Yeah, some history and a love story.
Yeah. Which island was that again?
This was Kauai.
Kauai. Yeah.
Kauai, where I was raised back and forth on Kauai.
Gotcha. Thank you for the trip to La Luz. I always have this struggle that I joke about on the show. It's like I love painting. I love talking to painters. It's always this audio thing of like, how do we see? How do we see?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. So, in talking about talking philosophy, I wanted to ask you one of the other big questions, which is either the annoying one or people really roll with, which is like in the grand scheme of things, like why we're up to anything is why is there something rather than nothing?
I love that question. I think that's something I've struggled with before I could even articulate it. I started having panic attacks really early in life. Like I remember being maybe 3 or 4, small enough where my dad could hold me in his arms, and I was shivering and adrenalized and couldn't even articulate what was going on. But he took one of my earliest memories. He took me outside to look at the stars as a distraction, and the bigness of the universe made it worse. Like it's like my adrenaline skyrocketed. And so I've always felt some discomfort about time and space and being here in this body at this time, and where I can't get out of it. And so, something rather than nothing. If nothing is a void, we have to figure out how to fill that void.
Yeah.
And as the drivers of our ships, the ones steering our ships, you get to decide so much about your personal reality. So that's something I think is the universe you create for yourself in your mind, and in your body, and in your behavior and how you live your life every day. And sometimes people get caught up in feeling like a slave to their life, whatever it is, and you need to break out of that. And then some people feel overwhelmed by the freedom that we have in this day and age to do anything you want to do. You can probably figure out how to do it. So, as I've ended some big chapters and started some new big chapters, definitely confronted what has felt like a void, and have had to be really intentional and mindful as the sole person driving myself forward about how I want to fill that void.
Yeah. Yeah. I throughout in you talking about the body, one of the things that I've discovered as I've gotten older is like I never even thought about it before, and that's a luxury of being a white male. When I was younger, still am, but like not thinking about, or there's also a disconnect sometimes with how do I feel this? How does my body feel about this? So, like, I've had to build up a lot of language that's been like very helpful for me, and is I view it connected a lot to being vegan, but also practicing yoga, my body, like as a male, like in inhabiting, and how am I feeling with this emotion and things like that. So I just read a
I
bunch of
think
yeah, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think it's a vocabulary we're all learning, especially
Yeah,
as the trauma researchers add their knowledge and wisdom to kind of the medical field, and how we as humans hold trauma. Animals shake it off.
yeah,
We don't have a mechanism to do that, or we don't remember, and so we store things in our bodies. And there's some bodies that feel obviously more comfortable in this world for whatever reason, social, political, or just personal. Um, and then some bodies that don't. I've always felt very uncomfortable being trapped in this body, and a body that had scoliosis, and a body that had to wear a brace for 13 years, 20 plus hours a day. I had a thought very early on, oh, I am not my body. I'm in here. I'm in this vessel that has to be cared for in a certain way. So I've always felt a disconnect. And I think that discovering veganism helped me. It was a new form of the way I have to take care of this temple, this vessel that I'm in, and helped me feel more comfortable in my body by being what felt to be healthier to me.
yeah, some sort of longer term integration, yeah, that was fascinating. But the point I was just going to mention quickly is just an aside. I've been reading a bunch of Kathy Acker, um, uh, punk novelist, firebrand. I don't know what she is exactly at the end of the day, but her books and obsession with the body and reclamation and trying to create a narrative out of it, so she would rip passages from Don Quixote wholesale, but then start to edit and document them for um, her character was, ended up Don Quixote, and but the reason I thought about it was because there was such a fascinating and aggressive interaction with the body by her as an artist, and just with her finding herself within that in a kind of a punk excitable way. But I think in talking with artists and learning about, think about mind body, right? So this philosophy, I go back to the philosophy stuff, right? Oh, you go to philosophy classes, the body rule the mind, you know which way is it, that type of thing. But you're always, I don't know, something with like art, philosophy, creating or just living, that there's this interaction between the body, what the body is, what it's doing, how it's placing itself. And I found that I've been able to learn a lot more over time by like delving into that, rather than, honestly, I think what the way I was taught was just ignore all that shit. Like, personally, just like fucking ignore it until it like really breaks down
Yeah,
on you or something.
I think it's a disservice that we don't learn. Um, we don't all have a shared concept in America. Like we're all in so many different cultures and religions, we don't have a shared concept of the bodies as a spiritual form. And there's so many different religions and cultures that have it organized where we have a physical body, and then we have a mental body, and we have a spiritual body. And there's some cultures that take it even further. There's even, higher levels of etheric bodies, like the auric bodies. And it creates so much more meaning and depth in life when you think about your experience on those different levels. And we don't really get training in that in any way unless you go find it through your own, spiritual journey or a religious journey.
Yeah.
I don't know if we really need volleyball in school. We might need some some spiritual guidance.
Need I've done union work in K-12 schools, and I got to bump into a project which was a mindfulness project. Like half the grade was doing the mindfulness, and the control over there wasn't. Holy shit! Guess
Interesting.
what you would see? On attention, tasks,
Yeah.
patience, resilience, and just some mindfulness techniques. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, everyone's losing their mind right now. This
yeah,
is such a, I argue with someone I know who feels like it's never been a better time to be alive. And I get that. We have so much technology to support our lives. And at the same time, I feel like there's unprecedented things happening to the human psyche and body and mind that are feel dark.
yeah.
And I don't know if I like what feels like is coming. I feel like we're on
Well,
a fast train somewhere where none of us really want to go, but it's still somehow driving forward.
yeah. They put it the speculative. And before we let you go here, just 2 days ago, I listened to George Carlin comedy routine,
Still
and
great.
the shit was funny. The
Yeah,
shit was funny. It was an hour comedy routine. George Carlin, God bless his soul, long past.
yeah, yeah.
Um, can
He
this
called
AI?
a lot of this. He called a lot of this
It
before it was
was
happening.
Ruby. It was funny. It was him, kind of mostly. Um, and I think some of the stuff on identity and talking about just kind of philosophical ideas, the things you interact with body and that type of idea and embodiment and voice with the AI. Like right now, just as far as an example, we've recorded this, and say we pulled some of your audio from different programs. You have some audio there. Think of the program with me on the podcast has 4 days of me speaking, 3 days of me speaking, like the amount of content. In like an hour, we could produce a you version of you and a me version of me and release a podcast in 6 different languages within like the next hour. And then we'll find out what you and I said to each other. And I'm like,
Right.
holy shit, like back in a
Yeah.
while, you come in with the screenplay for that. You might have that picked up at the studio.
Right.
And
Right.
that's today. It's
Yeah.
it's uh it's a wild world. In
Yeah.
this
Well,
wild
we're all
world,
trying
Ruby
to
Roth, where the
navigate.
heck
Yeah.
do people find your art, your stuff? Where do they go to find out about you
My
and your work?
My work is at rubyroth.co, rubyroth.co, and I've kind of made the transition to be focused on my adult art, but my children's work is there under projects, and that was, uh, it's there kind of as a worldwide campaign that I engaged with, and on Instagram I'm Ruby_Roth. And those are the two main platforms where people can find my stuff and whatever I'm working on. My shop is also at rubyroth.co. So there's prints and my new book, Boss Inside, where people can watch the trailer and take a peek at some of the inside pages.
Great trailer. I wanted to thank you deeply, Ruby, as the listeners can't see it, but I can see some of your paintings in the background, thinking about La Luz de Jesus. And, you put in a lot of time, and I don't know the whole story of the hits you've taken on things, but thank you for doing important work. And it's work, honestly, that can alter people's lives or well-being, how long they live, mental health,
Well, thank
mental
you for
health.
taking it
Yeah.
so seriously.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I'm doing it because I can't not do it.
Yeah.
Um, my website for a long time was drawordie.com. It's like I have to do it. It doesn't even matter if I never make a sale again or people don't ever see an artwork. Like that's one thing I think we all need to work on is like as artists, a lot of us are obsessed with the outcome and productivity, and
Yeah.
we really need to remember that as artists, we express ourselves in the way we make our bed every day, or how we pour our tea, or who we are to each other in the community, how we listen, who we are to our friends and family. And that is as much our art as drawing and painting is.
Yeah.
So it kind of um, helps kind of settle down in this world too. It's so such focused on capitalism is like, reconnecting and reclaiming yourself and who you are in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an authenticity question, and to stick with that and to know it. The element of choice, a lot of times when I do this show, is always the most fascinating one. People be like, I have no fucking choice, Ken. It's nothing I can do. It's what I do. And
Yeah.
and other folks being like, I drew 2,000 paintings. I didn't have much an aptitude to begin with, but then I could paint like a mofo. And like,
Yeah.
because of that, it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's path is really different.
It's just different. All right, Ruby, very, very happy to have met you and talked with you. I certainly hope to see your paintings and your art, down at La Luz, which I haven't been there yet. Like, and to see your works and great. Again, thank you for your courage and doing what you do and seeing what you're doing. It's a tough toil for any artist, and particularly if your crowd goes goofy on you and doesn't want you to breathe or express yourself in a new way. But
well, thank you for giving artists a platform to talk about things and for appreciating evolution.
All right, thanks, Ruby. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye now.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind the scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.